Everyone, depending on where you are in the world. It is Wednesday today, and we are back for another Confidence Convo. This is season 2, episode 5, I believe, and this week we are diving into how to form an identity. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce myself. I am Davina Maria, and I am a master coach and founder of the Restore Yourself Method and host of Worthy Woman Facebook group. And I help female go-getters in their 30s develop unshakable confidence so they can powerfully step into their limitless potential. Over to you, Joanna.
Hello, everybody. Hi, Davina. My name is Joanna Tonkin. I'm a registered psychotherapist, confidence coach, and the founder of the Confidence Formula. I help young adults improve their self-confidence so that they can become successful. Davina and I got together to create this for you because we are obsessed with all things personal development and we strongly believe in the power of learning from one another.
And just to clarify, we are not perfect at being confident all of the time. Like you, we move through our struggles and overcome obstacles and mindsets to continuously improve. So just think of us as guides by your side.
Yeah. So this week we thought we would jump into the really juicy topic of how to form an identity. And before we get into that, I just want to explain why this is so important to developing self-confidence. I've said it before and I'll say it again. In order to be self-confident, you really have to know who you are to be able to trust in who you are, to trust yourself. So developing an identity and knowing who you are is probably one of the first steps, one of the very early steps into developing a strong sense of self-confidence. And it's something that we're not really taught how to do. We kind of just fall into roles. We're a daughter or a son or a brother or a sister. We become a student from a young age. And these are kind of like labels or identifiers that we kind of take on from young ages. And then when we get older, we're kind of like an adult. And then we're like, what does that mean? And so I know with a lot of the clients that I work with inside the Confidence Formula, it's like, okay, so now I'm not a student anymore. I'm an adult. I'm maybe in the workforce, maybe not. I might be in a relationship, maybe not. And it's really about trying or starting to form an identity that makes sense and works for you. So today, Davina and I got together to talk about this topic because we really think it's really the foundation of developing confidence is really forming an identity that you're proud of, that you want to move into, and an identity that you want to become.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I think your identity is the foundation to pretty much, well, a lot of different things, to be honest. Not just your confidence, it's a foundation to a lot of different things, for sure. For sure.
Yeah.
Something that I was thinking about just as you were talking there, and hopefully I don't forget it at the end. But I know that there might be some people that are very much like, I have no idea what my identity is. So hopefully we can hold on to that and talk about it at the end. But I know that when I think about identity, I think about, I don't know if you can call it a phrase, but I think about the phrase of I am. And I think, when you kind of do like your coach training and you learn about how words are very important and how you phrase different things and what you say to yourself. I feel like a lot of people use the I am and give themselves an identity that sometimes maybe is not necessarily their actual identity. So as an example, I feel like a lot of people will say, like you said, I am a mother, I am a daughter, I am a sister, I am a friend, I am an employee. I think there's a lot of ways that we identify ourselves. But I think that it can go both ways. Sometimes we have the kind of neutral, what I call the neutral identifications, which are I'm a sister, I'm a mom, I'm a friend. That to me doesn't feel, positive or negative, feels quite neutral. Whereas I feel like sometimes we can go down the other path and we can kind of go, I'm stupid, I'm ugly, I'm useless, I'm hopeless, I'm da 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 da. I think there's a lot of ways that we can identify ourselves. And I feel like for me, whenever I kind of think about my identity, I think of the kind of thoughts or the words that I use to express who I am. And that normally starts with I am. And I think even when you think about when you meet someone new, and you don't know them and you're kind of talking to each other and you're getting to know each other, a lot of conversations start with, oh, I'm a dancer, or, I'm a psychotherapist, or I'm a life coach, or do you know what I mean? I feel like we always kind of use the I am to kind of identify ourselves. I think we might be frozen. I don't know if it's me, and I don't know if it's Joanna. I think we might be frozen. So I feel like, yeah, for me, the I am is so key. And I know that I just touched upon something at the beginning there about how to figure out. Oh, I think you're back.
Oh, I think I'm back too. Yeah.
Yeah, I think
Sorry,
you're
you were
back.
just
I was
saying
just kind of
something.
going through the whole I am.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going through the I am kind of phrase, and I was saying how, sometimes we can neutrally identify as a sister, an employee, a psychotherapist, a life coach, you can, an accountant, a doctor. But I feel like we can also identify negatively when,
Mm-hmm.
I know we've spoken about inner critic, we've got an episode on inner critic, but I feel like sometimes the inner critic can take over, and it can be things like, I am selfish, I am useless, I am ugly, I think sometimes there's different ways that we identify, but I feel like on some level it's all of our identity and what we believe that we are. And I think sometimes there's an element of accepting the yin and yang of, I am positively this, I am neutrally this, and sometimes I feel like I am negatively this, but I feel like sometimes it can be our full identity as well.
Mm-hmm. And I think what's important in what you're saying is like we have choice in how we identify.
Mm,
And what comes up for me is like why the brain even chooses or decides that it wants to label things in the first place. Like
yeah.
when we're young, we learn that like a table's a table and a chair's a chair and a bed's a bed, and this is my mom and this is my dad and this is my friend, and we identify things from a young age. But why is our brain doing that? Because it wants to make sense of the world around us. And so it
Mm,
kind of starts to label us in ways that make sense to us, right? If this is my mom, then I must be a child or a daughter. If this is my
mm,
sister, then I must be a sister as well. And so we kind of, with that, like when we have our identifiers, it's like it gives us kind of an understanding of like what that means, and then like what society expects
yeah.
of someone in that role or with that identity. So I think what's important in what you're saying is that we really do get to choose our identity, and our identity is also always changing, and we'll talk about that in a second. But if we want to choose labels and identifiers to describe who we are so that we become that person and we start behaving in the way that those people behave, if that's what's resonating with you,
Mm,
then being really conscious about the titles you give yourself and the roles that you take on, and what do you want to call yourself. Do you want to use the words like useless and selfish and
mm.
depressed to identify as, or do you want to use other words that can better describe who you are and who you actually want to become?
Yeah, I absolutely love that. I love the word choice. Um, and I love that whole concept of you can actually choose what you identify as, because I feel like you're right. When you're younger, you are told what you identify as, and you are given labels for things. And at that age, of course, you adopt those labels because that's right and that's normal and that's what you do. But as you become an adult, I think knowing or being aware that you have the choice to think, do you know what, I am no longer going to identify as whatever it is. I choose
Mm-hmm.
to identify something different. I think that is such a powerful shift. Absolutely powerful.
Totally. And I want to bring in a little bit of spiritual psychology here, if I may, and why it's so important to, learn and understand who you are, so you start, behaving in ways and becoming the person that you're supposed to be. So, our society, it's pretty riddled with anxiety and depression. A
Yeah.
lot of people suffer from anxiety and depression. And, the spiritual meaning, or the energetic meaning of depression, is the deep suppression of your authentic self, right? So it's like kind of being forced into or stuck in roles or a way of living or an identity that's not really who you want to be. And who we want to be is deeply suppressed, right? And that's why we become depressed, right? And so anxiety, similarly, is this feeling of not being who you are now. And it's like this energy of who you want to be is in the future. And it's this like buzzing, almost like magnetic feeling that we feel to wanting to move towards who we actually are, towards identity, but being stuck in who we are in the moment, right? So these things are actually grounded in psychology, in spirituality, and it really comes down to, again, knowing who you are, knowing who you want to be, and living authentically with that fulfillment and purpose, so that you don't develop these disorders.
Yeah. Do you know what? That is interesting. I didn't really know. I didn't know what you were saying there about depression. I know the anxiety piece we've spoken about before, but I wasn't aware of the piece that you've just mentioned about depression. I feel like that is so interesting. Just this week, I was speaking to someone about coaching, and I asked, what was happening, and they said that they are severely depressed. And it's so interesting that you've mentioned sort of like suppressing your real self, because knowing this person as I do, I feel like that is spot on. And yeah, I've never ever heard of this before, so it's so interesting. And I feel like I know that we've spoken about all of these things in different episodes, and we've kind of like broken down different subjects and different topics, and they all kind of interconnect. But I feel like what you identify as can definitely count against you, in the sense of, if you inaccurately identify yourself, if you identify yourself as someone who you are not, but you choose to believe that that is who you are, even though you're not, I think it can, even just saying it and hearing it in my head, I'm thinking that can cause such a massive conflict inside of you, because naturally you probably have a very deep knowing of who you are, and maybe you're afraid that you won't be accepted. And as we've spoken about in previous episodes, we all want to belong. We have a human need to belong. So it's absolutely okay to feel afraid that your real self won't be accepted. But I think if you suppress that real side of you, it's only ever going to affect you. And I think that, that's what we're talking about here when you've mentioned like depression, anxiety. And I think, if left unchecked for years and years and years, I think it could actually lead to, more serious conditions. So yeah, I absolutely love this. This is so,
Absolutely.
it's mind-blowing. It's mind-blowing for me.
Absolutely. And then just to give like an example to what you said, so like a lot of like women, for example, are trained to be like the nice girl or the good girl, and always being the nice girl or the good girl is going to have us rejecting parts of ourself that we're feeling
Yeah.
inside to be that way. And then this growing discomfort and this like anger and resentment builds inside of us until, we can't hold it in anymore. And then we start behaving in ways that might be rebellious or aggressive,
Yeah.
or, whatever it is. Or we live with being the nice girl and bottling up all those feelings so tight, and then we're probably going to become depressed or anxious, or
Yeah.
equally as uncomfortable, right? So just because society gives us a label or an identity that we think that we have to follow, it's really important to actually know what's going on inside of you that's really telling you who you want to be and who you actually are supposed to be, so you don't let these emotions kind of fester inside you.
Yeah, 100%. And I know we've spoken about emotions in previous episodes. I think, one of the tips that I would probably give is, if you feel these negative or uncomfortable emotions, they are normally a sign that something is not 100% right. and you
Yes.
need to pay attention to it. So I would say, if you are one of those people who's thinking, I really don't know what my identity is, I don't know how to kind of form it, I don't know what I'm doing with this, that's absolutely okay. And one of the things you can do is just pay attention to the emotions inside of you. And when
Mm-hmm.
certain things are happening or in certain situations, you can always think, oh, that didn't feel great. Why didn't it feel great? And then sort of leading with that curiosity and trying to kind of, reflect, it can really help you to think, I felt uncomfortable in that situation because I didn't stand up for myself.
Mm-hmm.
And that might not be my identity. Maybe I feel like I'm the good girl and I feel like I have to be nice to everyone all the time. But you know what? I don't want to identify as nice anymore. I want to identify as kind. But even though I'm kind, I can still stand up for myself and I can still say to someone, I'm really sorry, you've crossed a boundary there. So yeah, I think this is incredible. Incredible. I love it.
Yeah. Really, really important stuff. And we'll talk more about how to form an identity. But just like one disclaimer that we spoke that I just want to mention really quick is that your identity is always changing. From
Mm,
being an infant to a toddler to a school age person to being an elementary school person, middle school, high school, college, maybe a parent,
yeah.
maybe a partner, maybe senior, retired, whatever your labels are. They're always changing as we transition through life. So
Mm,
you really get to decide what you want to identify as. And because it's
mm,
always changing, it kind of gives you the to say, okay, an athlete, I want to be a musician, I want to be, whatever it is that you think that to pursue is really yours to then put on the identity and then start behaving in ways that are in alignment with that identity and becoming really whoever you want to
yeah.
be. And so you choose, you have the choice, and
Mm.
that's always, always changing. And never feel stuck because you have a label that you have to be X, Y, and Z when it might not resonate with you at this stage in your life. And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, that is so key. And I love that because I feel like, we all go through life and we learn and we grow and we change. And there's a saying that I love, and it's that the only thing that's constant in life is change. I love that
Love
saying
that.
because it's so true because things are always moving, paths are always moving. And I think, even with things like getting married, for example, I think for some people it can be huge. It can be absolutely like life changing because I feel like your identity is changing. You might have identified as a single person for a very long time. You might have filled in all the forms and everything, and you always ticked miss or whatever. And then the thought of then ticking a different box on a form and having to identify as something different can feel really scary because you've
Mm-hmm.
never been there before and you don't know what it feels like. You don't know what it looks like. And I think it's absolutely normal to have a level of anxiety, to a
Mm-hmm.
degree. Maybe not anxiety, but I think it's okay to feel a little bit scared and think, oh, I'm kind of crossing over like a threshold here. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know how I'm going to feel. I don't know if I'm going to like it. I don't know what it's going to be like. That is all 100% okay because, I know we've
Mm-hmm.
we've spoken about it in another episode about having a beginner's mindset. I think with all of these identity shifts, kind of approaching them with a beginner's mindset is going to be the best way to think, right, okay, what is it like? What is it like to be married? What is it like to be a wife? I don't know. Let's figure it out. Let's see how it goes. Um, and
Mm-hmm.
I think that embracing the change is hard, but also equally necessary because sometimes you can't run away from the fact that your identity is changing. So although you have a choice and you can think, I'm choosing my identity, yes, you are choosing your identity, but I think sometimes you can't sort of think, this is who I am, but I don't want to identify as it. Do you know what I mean? I think sometimes it can be a bit tricky when you're scared to kind of fully step into your identity.
Totally. Totally. And with that, I also want to add that just because you identify as something doesn't mean that you have to behave in ways that you think other people who have that label or identity also behave.
Yeah.
So if being a wife or a partner looks different to you than it does to other people in your life or society, that's okay. You get to make up your own rules of
Mm,
what that identity actually means for you.
yeah.
So definitely be kind to yourself, definitely have the compassion of when stepping into a new role to have that beginner's mindset, but also know that there really are no rules.
Yeah.
One thing you learn about life is there are no rules and you get to make them up as you go along. So just figure out what works for you in that time of your life, in that identity that you're forming, and just be yourself. And you'll know if it's not right because you're going to start to feel those uncomfortable emotions, the depression, the anxiety. And when you're behaving in ways that really feel authentic to you, you're going to feel a lot of joy and happiness and fulfillment. And that's how you'll know.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. That is amazing. I feel like we've kind of touched on quite a few different tips as we've gone through this episode, but I think it would be great to kind of summarize them into, a nice package. And I know you've just spoken about emotions, and I mentioned emotions as well. I think that is a huge thing, like paying attention to how you feel. I think you're so right. If you do feel depressed, or if you do feel anxious, or you feel generally just not great about something, definitely pay attention to that, because when you're feeling good, you will know that you're on the right path. You will know that this is working for me. This is good for me. I think that was definitely one of my tips, and I think one of the other ones is something that you touched on as well, is about like choosing what something means. So I think on one hand, you can choose an identity of a wife, for example. You can choose that, okay, that's the identity that I choose because I'm married. But I think you can also go a step further and say, okay, what does that mean to me? And what would I like that to look like for me? Rather than kind of, like you said, looking around and seeing what everyone else does and then maybe trying to kind of emulate someone else. I mean, it's all good to look for inspiration, particularly when you don't have, let's say you don't have a reference point for being a wife. It's absolutely fine to look for inspiration around you. But I feel like ultimately doing what's right for you will still come down to you thinking, right, okay, what does this mean to me? How would I like to be? What kind of a wife would I like to be? And I think that will help a lot with kind of stepping into that identity as well.
Totally. I kind of break it down. I like, formulas. I like really, steps to follow. And so when I was thinking about like how to form an identity, kind of similarly to what you said, I'm just going to put a different spin on it. The first thing is kind of identifying your values, knowing what's important to you. And a lot of people are like, so what are values? And so in psychology, we use something called the miracle question. If I had a magic wand and I could wave it and you could have whatever life you want, what would that life look like? Where would you live? Who would you live with? What kind of accommodations would you have? What would you do every day? How would you spend your time? What would you eat? What would you drink?
Yeah.
Who would you be with, right? And thinking about as many specifics about that life miracle question as possible. And then that's going to identify things that are important to you, right? So if, let's say, you'd say, I want to live in the mountains, I want to live in a trailer, I want to hike every day, and I want to, have my journal and my dog and live a very, simple life, right?
Yeah.
That says that nature is important to you. That says that self-reflection is important to you. That says that minimalist living is important to you, right? So that tells you a little bit about who. If you say, I want to live in a city surrounded by friends and family, in a big house, with a career that I love and a family that, I take care of, right? That says that, socializing is important to you. That says that your career is important to you.
Yeah.
Says that making money is important to you, right? None of these are right or wrong. It's just what is. So when thinking about your values and what's important to you, ask yourself, like, how ideally do you want to be living? And then we can work backwards to find out what's important to you.
Yeah.
That's my first step always. The second one is doing some self-reflection, right? So what does that identity, we talked about this already, really make you feel like you need to be? What does being a wife make you feel like you need to be like? Or being a partner, or being a mother, or being an employee? What does that title or that identity really hold with it? And so kind of reflecting on your beliefs around these titles, and where possible and when effective, challenging them. Like, does that work for you? Does that work for the person that you want to be and the identity that you want to form? Yes or no? And you'll know that because, like you said, the emotions will tell you. Their happiness and joy and contentment and fulfillment that means you're following, your belief in your true path. And if it's anxiety and depression, you're probably on someone else's journey, which is okay, but just recognize it and get back. One thing that I will say here, though, is that fear is a tricky emotion. Anxiety can be tricky too, because sometimes we can be on the right path and it can feel uncomfortable stepping out of our comfort zone. And so fear and anxiety and discomfort might show up anyways. That doesn't mean that you're doing it wrong necessarily. So I want to just say that. And we can talk more about that in the future, about fear and what that means moving forward. But just because you feel uncomfortable moving on your path doesn't always mean that you're on the wrong path.
Yeah, sure. I completely agree with that.
And then lastly, you kind of said it as well, I've said it before, but making choices. Finding opportunities to exercise the person that you want to be, the purpose that you have, the identity that you want to become, and just finding opportunities, trial and error, trying on different titles, trying on different, see if it works for you, if it feels good for you, great. If it doesn't, move on to the next one, try something else. Maybe that's not the right path for you. And so making choices that are in alignment with those choices. Those
I love that. And identities. I feel like there's some really good tips in there. I feel like we've covered a lot. I absolutely love the kind of trying different things, because I think we spoke about that in a previous episode as well, where you can just experiment with different things. And I love that approach to life, because I feel like, until you know for sure, it's absolutely okay to change your mind. It's absolutely okay to try different things and see if it fits for you. And even if you don't know what your values are, for example, trying different things is a great thing. Just go out, try different things and see what you love and see what you don't. So yeah, I absolutely love that experimenting sort of vibe and approach to life. As always, I think we can probably go on about this. Is another topic that I think we could talk about for hours and hours, but it's been so great talking to you about identity. And this is a super important topic. But we will be back in 2 weeks' time. And for more information on who we are, what we do, and our love of all things confidence and self-development, you can find or follow us from our social media information, which will be posted below. And if you like what you've heard, please feel free to like, share, or subscribe. And we will see you in 2 weeks' time.